Let's transition over to the balance that has to take place right now between being a developmental program and also we need to win now. And going to do a little bit of, self promotion here. We've had some guests on recently. I want to show a couple video clips and then I want to get your guys' thoughts after this. First one is we had Benning on about a month ago, and he talked about the need to be a developmental program. So here we go.
You have to be careful, because one of the things that's gotten away from Nebraska that I think that they've really got to get back to is, I'm big into, like, you have to speak it into existence. Say it out loud. Say it out loud. And you have to acknowledge some things. And I think Nebraska has to say out loud, we are a developmental program, right? Mm-hmm. What we do is we develop. Our freshman classes should supplement. They should be in addition to. They can't supplant what we're doing. Nebraska doesn't need to be in the business of playing freshmen immediately. No. You need to be sprinkling in your redshirt freshmen, starting redshirt sophomores and juniors, and then turning those guys over to the next level. It's all about development. So they have to be careful with the portal.
Okay, so there's a discussion there about being developmental and being careful with the portal. And I want to match that or balance that with these two from Brandon Vogel and Steve Sipple as well on the pressure to win now.
Consistently successful programs, I think, are built on kind of doing things for the sake of doing them. And it's the thing that gives me pause with Nebraska right now is the pressure to win is here. It's really here now, like going into 2022. So how do you kind of flip that? You can't make winning itself the goal. You kind of have to make being excellent at executing all of these tiny little things the goal, and the win should come with that.
I have a healthy skepticism about the whole thing. I mean,
yeah,
they got to make it work fast. That's the thing. I can't imagine. I mean, it's got to feel like fourth down over there every day now. And
it's a good way to say it.
Yeah, and they gotta make this work quickly. And I don't know what that's gonna look like.
Dave, it's got to feel like fourth down every day there now. Now those are big words from Sip, and by the way, some of those were from March, so that's prior to a lot of the successes in the portal that we've talked about. The roster has changed over some, but as you hear that, let's start with you, Dave, on this. How do you balance that need that we need to be a developmental program? We need to develop high school kids and walk-ons and all those things with that balance of, hey, we're also bringing in some guys from the portal that can help us now, and we need to win now.
Yeah, I think it's crazy from a lot of different angles of what NIL, the transfer portal, has done to rosters that, you've got all these players that showed up in January right after the season started, and a lot of players that had left, and then a lot of players that had played the full spring. And now you have this crop of folks like Mathis, and, I think Drew hasn't played it down, and now you pick up, Win today too. And then a few more folks potentially are coming this summer. And then all the freshmen that are going to start in July, and you got to figure out how to teach them everything by August, right? Like that, I would say that's certainly not lost on a lot of folks. What's the number? 33 total new additions this year out of 85? 32. I mean, that's crazy. That's an entire new team. Like you start to put together these lineups, you don't even recognize half the players on the team, not to mention, you're flipping the quarterback, you're flipping a lot of the wide receivers, a lot of the linemen, the D linemen. So I think there's an excitement to that. Like that's the exciting part of the offseason is you're like, oh yeah, on paper, we are phenomenal. We are starting 4 stars at every single position. But then when you actually play it out, you're like, how, when is Mathis going to learn the playbook, like tomorrow? Or when does when does he actually get to meet the guys? So I think that there's ideally you're in this developmental world. And that's where I think there's a little bit of okay, Iowa's not playing in the transfer portal game because they've just developed their players and they're developing properly. But they're missing out on a little bit of the excitement of we just got Trey Palmer and we got Alshon Mathis and we got all these big guys from the portal that can potentially be impact players right now. So I think it's a fascinating thing to watch. But I'm hoping with big impact players, we filled all the needs that we needed to fill. So as far as I'm looking, we needed some wide receivers, we needed some D linemen, we needed some O linemen, check. Now there's no excuses, right?
So Jim, we have, the Michigan State last year showed the ability to use the portal to bring in a whole new crew, and it worked well for them. How do you balance that need to be developmental that Damon's talking about with that, again, that need to, we had, as Dave said, some immediate needs. We had to fill some spots, and that's what the portal's done for us.
You have to, I think, first look at the actual here and now, right? Currently, right now, Nebraska, Frost has to win this year, right? So you think about yourself, if you're in Frost's shoes, do you want to go with the guys that you have right now and say, well, these are the high school guys I've developed, and we're going to just see how it plays out next year, right? Or do you say, I'm going to be all in with everything, right? I'm going to get the coaches that I want, that I need. I'm going to get the recruiting person that I want, that I need. I'm going to get, because I can, every player I think can help my team win next year, right? And I think we have to look at that and say that's the reality of the situation we're in right now. We have to win next year. So I think you kind of compartmentalize that for a section for this conversation, but then long term say who we are. And you really haven't had Frost say a whole lot that he's a development program, right? You've said it a few times, but I haven't heard him really talk about that. So really, I kind of wonder if he really wants to be a development program, or if he wants to be a program that looks kind of like we have right now. I don't really know. I think we all in this podcast want that to happen, want it to be a program we can develop and so forth, but I haven't really heard us define that yet. And so I think here and right now we go ahead and say we're all in, if the players need to make it better, but then work on that high school part of it. Here's some kind of interesting. Think about Minnesota, right? Minnesota, Wisconsin development programs, right? Minnesota got 8 transfers this year, okay? And their offensive line is a great offensive line. They have, we think, one of the best offensive lines in the country. They will actually have 3 transfers on their offensive line next year. So I think we think of ourselves as being the only one playing in the transfer game, but programs that develop guys like Wisconsin, they got 6 players in the transfer portal. Minnesota 8. Iowa is the one exception. They only have 1. But, I mean, there are other teams out there that are also developing guys and bringing a lot of guys in as well in this new portal system. So I think you have to take a step back for a second and look at the kind of the big picture. Yeah, 15 is a lot for 1 year, but it's obviously, to me, it seems like it's probably the outlier in the situation because of the situation that Nebraska is currently in. I don't see that happening down the road next year. So
sure. I mean, this is a season of transition, an off season of transition period from the coaching changes that happened across the board, new special teams coordinator as well. So 2 of the 3 coordinators are new. And then what comes with that, we talked about the defensive potential changes with alignment. You're talking about a lot of changes to where you might need some new players to fit that. So yeah, I don't think this is a recipe for success every single offseason. I don't think Michigan State, I haven't looked at their transfer numbers, but I doubt that they match what they did a year ago. You know, they did what they needed to do a year ago, and if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, you know, you'll pay for it. I mean, I think without a doubt, the one thing with these transfers is that you really do need them to pan out. You know, Casey Thompson can't come in here and be an abstract failure. We need a guy that's going to come in and be a starter and be a leader, you know, like any quarterback. Now, Rob, you were saying something, and I'm sorry if I cut you off there earlier.
Oh, I don't even remember what I was going to say right now, so it's okay. That was like 5 minutes ago.
I could jump in on that. I think it was interesting what you're saying there, Jim, on Frost, on what he wants to be. I feel like he's almost like changed his identity almost every season, right? I appreciate it because I feel like he's learning from the mistakes and making changes, right? And we saw him make changes to the coaches. But even as you go back to like the first 2 years, he was recruiting tiny wide receivers, right? And it was like, okay, here's the tiny, fast wide receivers. They worked at UCF. They worked at Oregon. Year 3 is like, we're done with that. We got, now we got big guys like Omar Manning and Betts. And like every year he's seemingly had to be like, okay, now here's a new offense I'm going to try and see what works. And I think with that has come this like Frankenstein team that we put together. And ideally it would have been nice to start with this 5 years ago, but he definitely is coming with a like, okay, now I didn't have a pass rusher. Like, here comes one. So I feel like he's, I appreciate him because he at least doesn't stick with his, he's like, this is what I'm going to do. He's at least willing to adjust, but it does feel like he's sort of put together like 5 different Frankenstein teams that have resulted in this team that's full of good players, but it definitely has. I would agree with you, Jim. He hasn't been like, we're going to develop.
And I remember what I was going to say when you just reminded me too, Dave, is that I think that what you just mentioned too is a little bit more of how some programs like Nebraska who are kind of rebuilding and trying to get back to a certain point, this is how it's going to be. I mean, it's going to look a little bit more and more, and I'd say it like the pro football model, where you're going to see more and more new players coming in every year with, a lot of the, like, it's like the NFL right now, right? Like these guys, they have their playbooks, but they're getting to their OTAs right now for the first time on their new teams. All of them are going in for these, 10-day OTAs. And it's the first time that they're going to see a lot of these guys. And it's going to be the same way with a lot of these recruits. Hopefully with some of these transfers and these recruits that are coming in, they get their playbooks and they are studying them, and they are, the reason why they were brought in is because they're the kind of people that are going to start learning this. Because I mentioned this on the Hill Varsity podcast last week too, is that, Honky and I used to joke that, like, if they're not on campus for the spring game, they're dead to me, but we can't think that way anymore, and even guys like, and Honky and I had a great back and forth yesterday about Omar Manning and how I thought he was going to be like the number one breakout player. And then last year, he's going to be the number one breakout wide receiver, and he hasn't been yet. And this is his prove it year. It really is. And of course, I'm going to stick with him the same way that I say 15-0, and I think that you're going to have to start seeing these guys, though, kind of opposite of that, making that instant impact, because otherwise, and it's going to be every year. It's not just this year, not just for Frost's job, it's going to be for the next guy's job. It's going to be for the guy after that's job. It's going to be for a guy down at another college, because that's just what the transfer portal is going to be. Yeah. I mean, I can even show it right up the street right here at University of Northern Colorado, where they lost like 25 guys to the transfer portal, and now they're bringing in all these new recruits into town. So,
well, and that's what to jump in on that point too, like that's what excites me about NIL. It's what excites me about the transfer portal, all of it, that, like, going all the way back to where you started this thing with hockey with Jimbo and Saban going at each other, is, a lot of the narrative is like only the big schools that are able to raise these funds, raise these collectives to be able to participate in this world are going to be able to compete in this modern world. And I'm okay with that as long as we're in that sphere, right? Yeah. Like, I'm okay with that. Like all these people who are opting out of NIL entirely, good. Send them to like Division II.
I hope Nick Saban goes on a rant about it.
Send them to Division II, right? Like the big guys are going to keep playing, and if the big guys can play, this is our chance. Like, this is what I see is, like, let's seize an opportunity where we can take our collective fan support and let's continue to, let's get back into that upper rung where we have it, right? We have the fan support, the business support, the team support. That's where I feel like this tidal wave, if we can ride it back to the top tier, I think it's huge.
Yeah, Nebraska. Oh, go, Jim.
I was going to say, I was talking about Frost and kind of who he is, and Dave, you talked about, really, I wonder, he's kind of changing each year, and he's kind of finding his way in this Big Ten, right? I wonder if he also enjoys the transfer player, right? The actual player that's coming in here that made a decision. He's got one opportunity to transfer in without sitting out a year. It's all about business for that player. It's not a freshman he's got to babysit and kind of figure out, are they going to adjust to Lincoln? Are they going to be okay in the dorms? Is he going to like the food? We're talking about an older player that's coming in here to compete like heck and to play, right? Not all the time. They don't always work out. I mean, you can talk about, Marquis Step, but the Samari Torres, these players that come in, they got 1 year to maximize. I wonder if part of Frost kind of likes this type of player, the Casey Thompsons, that put in work, but now it's their time to shine, and they got to hit it. They got to hit it hard. And there's no fuzzy business. It's here's the deal. Here's what we want you. You want to come in. You want to compete. You want to play. There's not a whole lot of extra stuff. And I'm just kind of theorizing if part of him enjoys that type of player. I don't know.
Hmm. I think something that Benning talked about, speaking it into existence, I think that's important with any staff, what it is that, what's your philosophy? What do you want to be? Jim, I know you have pinned to your Twitter account the comment that Joseph made about, in-state recruiting, how we want to close the borders out. You speak it out loud. I went to the first coaches clinic that Frost did back in 2018. And the very first coach that he had up there to talk to us wasn't one of the position coaches or a coordinator. It was Duvall talking about weight and strength and conditioning. And that was important. It was him speaking it out loud. I mean, this was a big deal, spoke it into existence, showed Khalil Mack when he was at Buffalo the Bulls, and And Duvall worked with him for 4 years and showed his photo from his freshman to his sophomore to his junior and senior year. Development, right? Developing a player over the course of time. I think Nebraska, we're going to be at our best when we have that mix, that balance of being a developmental program with also, there's probably always going to be an offseason moving forward. And this is the one thing for Redcasters, if you hate transfer portals and NIL, I don't know. I don't think we're ever going to get away from it completely. I think there's every offseason, there's going to be 1 or 2 or 3 needs, right? The goal is that you develop enough players over the course of time that you don't have to have 15 needs like we're having this offseason. The goal is you're not making whole house changes across a staff like we did this last offseason. You know, we're not going to be changing X's and O's as much as we probably are during this offseason. So the needs to go into the portal and have as much change isn't always going to be there, but it's always going to be there. There's always going to, and I think, Dave, with what you're doing with the collectives and what we're trying to do across the board as fans, you know, everything we've done to support the team when it comes to recruiting, to show up at Friday Night Lights, to fill up the stadium financially, there's ways you can do it now with NIL, which I think is great. If those are the things that can help us get those 1 or 2 or 3 difference makers in those off seasons, that's going to be that's a long-term success kind of strategy. Right now, I think the balance is we've got to win right now. We can't, you know, there is no worrying about what happens in 2024 or 5 if we're not, you know, having winning seasons this year, you know, and that's the part right now. It's got to feel like 4th down right now. But we even talked about that with Dylan Raiola. I think one time, Jim, we were talking about, you know, that's December of 2023 when he signs, wherever he signs. I know he's committed to Ohio State. I don't care right now. There's 24 football games guaranteed that we're going to have between now and then. We've got to win now. So I saw a couple of, you know, notes coming across the bottom there, Rob. What do we have so far?
Well, it's mostly about first Troy said good take, and so I'm just going to assume that was about my take.
Sure it was.
Yeah, I'm sure, because, you know, everybody loves them some Redcast Rob. Transfer portal, let's see here. The transfer portal allows us to supplement the program to fill spots left vacant from the high turnover of prior classes. And then he said, when classes stabilize, development will improve. It seems like they're having a conversation in the comments here, so maybe we should just bring them on the show. I wonder if the portal will develop us from truly becoming a developmental program again, though, the kind of, you know, chicken and egg theory, right?
Well, it will if they're constantly doing 15 a season. Yeah. There's no doubt
about that. And then Eric Sockinson again said, if we continuously depend on the portal to fill gaps, then I agree. So, you know, hey, Eric, Ken, DM me, you know, we'd love to anyway, I'm joking. So
I agree with those takes. I think it's an interesting chicken and egg that continually happens, right? Because I think, you know, as I look at this and, you know, the high turnover to prior classes, kind of what you were saying, Jim, like Frost has missed on a lot of guys, right? Like that can't be ignored. That like, as you look at a lot of these guys, that it's such a bummer that they're taking off. And, you know, the list of wide receivers that have come in that I've been pretty excited about that, you know, have gone and left and gone to North Texas and a variety of other schools, that I do agree with the piece there, Jim, that you're saying, that he gets to recruit a 20-year-old that has played, you know, 24 games in the Big 12 or 20 games in the Big 10 or whatever it might be, that he's able to take them. Because there's just been a lot of misses. I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's on the recruiting and the development or what happens there. But I think that component, you know, can't be ignored in this whole equation. Like a big reason we're filling a lot of these gaps is like there has been a lot of misses that have gone out and taken off and gone elsewhere.
Well, some of it could be the system. Could it be the systems too? And maybe I'm asking a question. So
yeah, it's all of that, right? I mean, you know, that used to be my argument sometimes with Martinez. Is it the player? Is it the system? It's probably a little bit of both.
It was an argument we were having yesterday, Honky. Come on.
Well, I've had it many times with you.
Yeah.
How about though? Let's look at the staff that we have right now since the last time we played a game. And you want to talk about development. How do you develop players? Or a good way to develop players is to get the best developers out there. Is Mark Whipple a step up right now to coach those quarterbacks? You know, is Brian Applewhite a step up right now to coach those running backs? Is what Mickey Joseph doing a step up with those wide receivers, Dave, that you've been talking about over the, you know, this is now for some of these guys, probably their 3rd wide receivers coach at Nebraska, but these are step ups
huge
across the board. And that's at least a good starting spot to talk from if we're talking about developing players.
You know, I agree with that take, Honky, a lot. And the way I see it too is I'll just give a good like real world example for me. So for like years with my I've had a boss and then I've had my boss's boss. My boss left like a year ago. And my boss's boss took over our team because she's like, you guys, pretty much you guys have the talent that we need. We don't need to hire somebody and oversee you. I can now see it. Joseph and Whipple are kind of like my boss's boss, right? Like these are guys that have like so much more experience, and they know they've got going to have the talent in here, and they're just going to be able to run this team, in my opinion, a lot better than a couple of these guys have in the past, which is proven by the fact that Frost has had to step in and take over some of these things when instead of just being the head coach, right? So now he's got bosses working for him, right? Like if you're a head coach and you're the smartest guy in the room, you're not going to win games, right? Like that's a fact, right? You want the smartest guys in the room working for you. And that's just the way it goes. You want that from the top down, and any successful organization is going to feel that. And I feel like Whipple and Joseph are probably two of the smartest guys in the room, especially when it comes to offense. And add Bush into that. And I'm telling you,
Osborne was pretty smart, but
yes,
but he's also the GOAT.
But he also admitted that he had a bunch of guys in his room with him that were, just as smart as him.
Institutional knowledge.
That's
They've
right.
been around with them for a long time. Jim,
Here's the question. What is the head coach's actual job, right? The head coach's job is to coach the coordinators. Coordinators coach assistants, and then they coach the players. So we don't have to have Frost coach the actual wide receivers and get involved in the wide receiver play. I mean, that's why you hire Mark Whipple. That's why you have Eric Chenander, who's developed his defense year after year into a better defense. He coaches them. And yeah, he can get involved here and there, but his real job is to make sure that they're doing what he expects them to do. And conversely, their assistants are carrying out the mission and the goals and the vision that Chenander and Whipple have for the offense and defense. So we can't overcomplicate the role. Now Frost has got to own that position and really make sure that what he wants and what he expects is being done by Whipple and Chenander. But that's why you go out and hire good assistants, right? So that you can make sure that your message in that running back room that wasn't really controlled last year. They did a really good job there last year with just that room itself is now dialed in. I mean, you saw how quickly that room got prepared and performed in the spring. So I think we kind of have to, back to Rob's point, I mean, the job of Frost is really, I think, defined, and we kind of have, I think we overcomplicate his actual role in this whole thing.
Hey, Jim, I don't know if are you talking into a microphone, or we're hearing like some feedback when you're talking, so I don't.
Let me switch back to I had to charge my phone. This is great live TV or live webinar stuff. Let me go back to my.
I think to pile on what Jim was saying there, that like, and going back to Rob and Honky when you guys had Ozzie on, like the institutional knowledge thing is probably what makes me the most nervous for this upcoming season is, he had those assistants on his team for 18, 19, 20 years before really like turning the corner and hitting it big. Right. So like, as much as I blindly trust Mickey Joseph to fully turn the wide receiver room around, and he's got all these new recruits and they're just instantly going to learn the offense and be phenomenal, there is that element of like, it did take, it took Ozzie like 15, 20 years to kind of find like the magic formula. And so it is, I just feel like some of that falls on how much harder it is to coach now. And there's plenty of coaches that are doing it. Mel Tucker did it. Saban does it everywhere he goes. Urban Meyer does it everywhere he goes. And so those elite coaches figure out how to win right away. But that I would say that element, it's not lost on me because it goes even back to the portal conversation we're having. We've added 7 players since spring ended. And so like all those guys are showing up to a brand new offense and a brand new team and a brand new offensive coordinator, a brand new wide receiver. So, for me, I think like everybody's setting this ridiculously high bar. I think as long as they show pretty solid progress, and hopefully it's impossible to not show progress after a 3-win season, but you get up to 6, 7, 8 wins and you start to show the team is coming together. I think they can buy themselves some time because asking these guys to turn the entire program around in 6 months is a tall order.
Let's go ahead.
I was just going to say, you talk about like development, missing on guys. Purdue, for example. Purdue's developed, I think, the 2 best receivers in the division, right? David Bell and Rondell Moore in the last 2 years. Purdue is desperate right now for wide receivers. Okay? They have their top guy is going to be a transfer from Iowa last year, Tyron Tracy. They wanted Marcus Washington desperately. So are they developing guys the same way they should be with their track record of putting out guys? And why are they desperate to go in the portal for wide receivers? So I think we can't just think of Nebraska having these needs. There are other teams that have needs out there. They're going after players in the portal too. I mean, Purdue has 8 guys they brought in this year, and they won 9 games last year. So I wonder what is too much in terms of transfers, and what is the actual sweet spot that's going to be people like, okay, that's where we want it, right? I don't know. I don't know what that number is, but it's kind of interesting to kind of see what people's reaction to that is. Is it too much? Is it too little? I mean, Purdue, is it 8 too much? Is Minnesota too much with 8? I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll kind of
Well,
see.
and Marcus Washington, that's an interesting one there with Purdue, because as we talked about earlier, Purdue is one of the teams that doesn't have as big of an NIL presence, at least right now.
None.
And
Yep.
and so, that's not the only reason that we would get him. Obviously, I don't think we get him if we don't have a guy like Mickey Joseph coaching him too.
Correct.
And these are all everything. We don't have to throw everything all into one. This is the only factor that's going to matter. Everything's supplemental. If NIL can help supplement things, if the portal can help supplement things, we need to develop, and be a developmental program. That's part of it too. Nebraska is going to be at its best when we do a lot of those things well. And we've always been resourceful. I mean, that's something that is the history of this program. I mean, we were the first ones to have a Husker Vision kind of program in the stadium. The strength and conditioning that we did back in the day, the walk-on program, the way that we used that. There were a lot of things that, were not natural resources that we had. It was just things that we built and used to our advantage over the years. And right now, in the new age of football, NIL, portal, those are some of the things. And yet there's still some old school traits that will work too.